Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Egypt's parliament passed a constitutional amendment to Article 76 with a sweeping majority, thus allowing multi-candidate presidential election for the first time in the history of Egypt. The opposition contested the amendment, saying that the terms are impeding. One of the conditions is that anyone interested in running in the presidential election requires the approval of 300 elected parliamentary officials, members of the Shura Council and City Council members.
As expected, the Parliament passed the constitutional amendment to Article 76, thus allowing multiple candidates to run in the presidential elections instead of voting for just one candidate. The opposition and independents had reservations on the terms of the amendment, especially those relating to the terms of candidacy, requiring the approval of 250 members of the Parliament, the Shura Council and the City Councils. This condition makes it impossible for independents to acquire such numbers unless approved by members of the ruling National Democratic Party.
The proposed candidacy terms are actually restrictions. In light of the current situation, the conditions and the environment, this would restrict nominating a rival candidate to the majority party's nominee.
This was a heated parliamentary session, but some believed it to be cosmetic due to the absolute majority of the ruling National Democratic Party, therefore closing the doors in the face of those opposed to emptying the amendment of its content. The opposition had reservations of the amendment, saying that it allows the government or the ruling National Democratic Party to nominate a rival candidate to President Mubarak in the upcoming election. Not only did this issue create fierce discussions between the opposition and the ruling party, but it led some opposition groups to yield, saying there is no use of opposing it. They will bet on the winning ticket and encourage adopting a plan not to dispute the extension of President Mubarak's terms amidst random accusations of buying his rival candidate.
Today no one will come, and we, the Nasiris, will not accept that Egypt be ruled by bats, rats, agents, or those who receive bribes.
The public joined in the disputes, especially in light of the parliamentary tug-of-war, with a number of members walking out of the session. Some even withdrew from the presidential candidacy, such as the Tajamu Party nominee. They said that what the authorities give with one hand, they took back with the other. Some even went to the extent of describing what happened as a legislative massacre by a democratic process eliminating everyone from the candidacy game. In response, supporters of President Mubarak gathered in solidarity with the movement, and they even blessed it.
People, this is a position of political leadership in the country. They say the approval from 25 parliament members, 14 Shura Council members, and 140 City Council members is required.
Receiving the Constitution in this method, even if it actually closes this issue, will open up another issue of controversy surrounding the government's credibility toward change on the ground. Hani Amara, Abu Dhabi Television, Cairo.
In Tunisia, major opposition parties did not participate in the municipal elections, accusing the Tunisian authorities of distancing all their candidates. Approximately 4 million voters went to the voting booths to elect their municipal consultants in Tunisia. These elections are the 13th of their kind in Tunisia since its independence in 1956. The Democratic Constitutional Coalition, led by President Zainuddin al-Abidin Ben Ali, dominated these elections. Some view what is happening in Tunisia as a step towards democracy. Others, consider it as a cosmetic measure with no tangible effects. Political opponents view the democratic process in Tunisia and the recent municipal elections from different perspectives. Some are enthusiastic about the elections because they see them as a tool to strengthen democracy and a way to engage citizens in the policy-making process. Others cast doubt on the true intentions of the Tunisian authorities. They believe that these municipal elections, which are the 13th of their kind since the independence of the country, are only cosmetic to make the regime look better, despite the fact that it has been decreasing the influence of the opposition parties inside the municipal councils and distancing them from the policy-making process. Approximately 6,000 candidates from 9 parties ran in these elections. The most prominent one is the Democratic Constitutional Coalition led by President Zainuddin al-Abidin Ben Ali. They are competing for over 4,366 seats with a 5-year term of office. The result of these elections, which were held only 6 months after the presidential and parliamentary elections were known in advance because the opposition parties are divided and some political forces were absent either by choice or by force. Furthermore, the widespread support of the ruling party enabled them to dominate all municipalities. Thus, the election results were not much different from the results of the year 2000 elections, when the Democratic Constitutional Party won 90% of the municipal seats. While the Islamists and the Communists were absent, opposition parties that were united under the People's Unity Party accused the Tunisian authorities of threatening some of its candidates and trying to bribe others. They say that the government's objective is to prevent them from participating in these elections and silence those who have different views. The government refuted these accusations, saying that 26 lists were prevented from running in the elections for violating the law. Some say that what is happening in Tunisia is not necessarily motivated by internal factors. The Tunisian government knows that the American administration has been exerting pressure on its Arab allies, asking them to respect public freedoms and promote democracy. Tunisia wants to avoid doing anything that may affect its relations with the United States.
Previously, a statement was issued by the Ministry of Interior about the presence of a suspicious car in the Wabi district east of Riyadh at 10 p.m. on Monday, April 1st. Now, there was an exchange of gunfire between the security forces and the driver of this vehicle. The driver was injured and arrested. An official from the Ministry of Interior said that the investigators found out that the injured driver is Abdelaziz Bourshid bin Hamdan Tawal'i L'Anezi, who is a Saudi national and wanted by the security agencies. He is in one of the misguided groups and a symbol of corruption and divisiveness. He has an influential role in spreading the Takfir school principles among the misguided groups, and he is a member of their alleged religious committee. Because he carries a university degree, his colleagues looked up to him for guidance in their extremist thinking. He provided them with a justification to cover their criminal acts and with a tool to misinterpret religious rulings and issued invalid religious decrees. Some of his writings that are published on the internet consider some Muslims infidels and permits their murder and calls for fighting security men. In an attempt to provide a religious cover for his misguided group and manipulate them, he used different publishing names including Akhum Ta'allah, Farhan Mashhur Ruwaili, and Abdullah Nasir al-Rashid. He is also used as a reference in many extremist published writings. Not only did he have extremist ideologies, but also he practiced them. He buried 2 of his group members after they were killed by security forces in remote areas and confronted security forces. Although his colleagues try to protect him and hide him so they can use him to tempt teenagers and religiously uneducated individuals, God enabled us to get rid of him. God does not help dividers.
His Majesty the King has said Jordan's political and socio-economic reforms are aimed at creating a democracy that reflects modern civil society and strong Arab Islamic values. Addressing a summit in Brazil of South American Arab countries on the King's behalf, His Royal Highness Prince Ali bin Al-Hussein said the Arab world was looking ahead to a future of promise and mutual benefit. He said a new and active partnership between the two regions was key to building on common interests and priorities. His Majesty noted that Arab and South American countries had seen the positive impact of homegrown reform and were aware of the importance of involving all citizens in shaping the future.
وإنه من دواعي سعادتي أن أنقل إليكم تحيات صاحب الجلالة الهاشمية الملك عبد الله الثاني بن الحسين المعظم، وأقول لكم جميعا السلام عليكم. أيها السيدات والسادة، إن التنمية المستدامة هدف أساسي هام لكلا المنطقتين، وهي المسار الوحيد لتوفير الفرص للأجيال الشابة من شعوبنا في الحاضر والمستقبل. وقد شهدنا في البلدان العربية وبلدان أمريكا الجنوبية التأثير الإيجابي للإصلاح النابع من البيئة المحلية، وتعلمنا أهمية إشراك جميع المواطنين في صياغة المستقبل وتحديد معالمه.
Prince Ali led the Jordanian delegation to the summit's opening session, which mainly discussed activating Arab-South American cooperation in trade and investment. He told the gathering that Jordan had invested in education and a knowledge infrastructure.
النهج الذي اختاره الأردن يستهدف إصلاحاتنا السياسية والاقتصادية والاجتماعية إلى إيجاد ديمقراطية تعكس المجتمع المدني الحديث وقيمنا العربية الإسلامية العريقة في آن معا. وقد استثمرنا في التعليم وفي البنية المعرفية، وعقدنا شراكة مع القطاع الخاص والمجتمع المدني، وسعينا إلى التعاون مع الأصدقاء والشركاء في أرجاء العالم.
Arab and South American leaders opened the unprecedented two-day summit between the regions in the Brazilian capital. The summit was proposed by Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva after his visit to the Middle East in 2003. Arab League Secretary General Amr Moussa welcomed the event and expressed his pleasure that Iraqi President Jalal Talbani was among the delegates. The inevitable political aspects have already caused Israelis and the United States concern. A draft of the final declaration contained passages supporting the right of people to resist occupation, a sign of support for the Palestinians in their struggle against Israel. And while condemning terrorism, it also calls for a global conference to define the meaning of terrorists. The summit brings together leaders from 12 South American and 22 Arab nations, the first time that such an event has been held. It also forms part of Brazil's drive to forge a role as a regional diplomatic power and leader of the developing world. Israel has said a Gaza withdrawal will go ahead this summer and played down a comment by its foreign minister that the government will rethink the pullout if Hamas wins Palestinian parliamentary elections. Defense Minister Shaul Mofaz, tasked with overseeing the pullout, said the army was ready to evacuate settlers by mid-August. However, Prime Minister Ariel Sharon vowed to keep major West Bank settlement blocks. Nida Ramahi has more in the story.
Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon has vowed to hold on to major West Bank settlement blocks and stated for the first time that Palestinian refugees would never be able to return to Israel. Sharon laid the letters on the dotted line as the deadline for the Gaza withdrawal plan drew closer and questions rose as to whether it will be applied. Sharon confirmed that it was a highly important step for the State of Israel to take. Although he declined to give an exact date for the pullout, he has said that once started, the evacuation of all 21 Gaza Jewish settlements and 4 in the West Bank would not take more than 3 weeks. Earlier today, Palestinian Prime Minister Ahmed Al-Qiyah had accused Israel of not being serious about the withdrawal or returning to the negotiating table. Quraysh's comments came after Israeli Foreign Minister Silvan Shalom threatened that the Gaza withdrawal would be derailed if Hamas won the Palestinian parliamentary elections. But while Palestinians wait to see the implementation of the withdrawal plan, Israeli settlers want to block it. A riot started outside an Israeli court where a case was being heard against militant Jewish settler Neriya Ofin on suspicion of militant activities. The riot broke out between police and settlers after the group tried to force their way into the Beersheba court. Ofin had been jailed without trial until the end of September to ensure that he would not be involved in violence that would thwart the withdrawal. He had been detained without trial under the administrative detention order, a law applied previously only on Palestinians suspected of militant activities. Israel's Haaretz website had said Ofin was suspected of illegal activities, including terrorism, and in 1998 had been placed under restrictions by Israel's Secret Service because of plans to harm Palestinians. The pullout is scheduled to begin in July or August, and Jewish settlers and their supporters have threatened to block it, with some vowing to stop the withdrawal by all means possible. Nida Ramahi for Jordan Television.
A follow-up committee of opposition factions has met to prepare for a wider Congress this week to draft a political platform for the opposition ahead of the polls. Al-Mustaqbal Daily said General Michel Aoun's Free Patriotic Movement will be represented. They will create joint committees to represent the opposition in all electoral districts. A short while ago, MP and former Minister Sleiman Frangi confirmed he will run for elections and urged unity among the Christians of Lebanon. Frangi, a staunch backer of Syria, met Maronite Patriarch Cardinal Nasrallah Boutros Ferry in Kirki, where he lashed out at some opposition figures he did not name, accusing them of reneging on their pledges and rejected their promises of change. More with Sarah Khoury.
Lebanon began preparing for much-awaited legislative elections as cracks emerged in the opposition camp, exacerbated by the return of General Michel Aoun. With pressure mounting from the United States, the United Nations and the European Union to hold free and fair elections, politicians began consultations to draw up electoral lists. Syria completed the withdrawal of its troops and intelligence officers from Lebanon on April 26, under pressure from both the Lebanese opposition and international community. Elections for the 128-seat parliament are to be held on 4 consecutive Sundays, starting May 29th. But the return of Aoun and the opposition's failure to unite against the electoral law used in the 2000 polls is threatening to bog down Lebanon's quote-based sectarian system of politics. Christian opposition leaders were pressing for a new law based on smaller constituencies, but others appears to favor the large constitutional boundaries on grounds any change could torpedo elections and tip the country into turmoil. The assassination on February 14th of former Prime Minister Rafik Hariri galvanized demands for change and paved the way for an end to 29 years of Syrian domination. There are still no declared solid alliances for the ballots, but former Beirut MP Tamam Salam confirmed he would not take part, saying the results are apparent beforehand. Al-Mustaqbal Daily said Hezbollah will name Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah's top political aide, Haj Hussein Khalil, for one of the Shia seats in Beirut, and that it will inform Saededdin Hariri of his decision. MP Ghatas Khouri, a member of the late Hariri's parliamentary bloc, told reporters the opposition is working on creating, in his words, calm alliances across Lebanon under a program that maintains national policies. And MP Sleiman Frangi, a political heavyweight under the ancient regime, finds himself weakened in a new political order and the large divisions of voting districts that had governed the 2000 elections. But he insisted he will run in the polls and need an alliance, although he did not reveal it. He praised General Michel Aoun. Since his triumph returned Saturday from 15 years of exile in France, Aoun has been holding court at his house in the residential suburbs of Rabie, patching up ties with old foes, including Hezbollah. He also received Seterida Jaja, the wife of jailed Christian warlord Samir Jaja, who fought a bloody battle against Aoun's forces in the dying days of the civil war, and the pair agreed to turn a page on the past. His guests included Hezbollah representative Ali Ammar, who said a meeting would be held soon between General Ron, the former armed forces chief, and Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah. He said they both share Aoun's calls for political reform. An electoral alliance could be formed between them in Mount Lebanon. Ali Ammar hinted at the possibility of a coalition. Aoun said he was waiting for opposition politicians' response to his call to build a democratic Lebanon. He promised he would help reform Lebanon's sectarian-based political system. Aoun, a one-time army commander and interim prime minister, lost the so-called War of Liberation against Syrian forces in 1990. He was sent into exile in France, but an arrest warrant against him was dropped earlier this week, clearing the way for his return.
Almost 18,000 people, a number chosen to symbolize the Hebrew word chai, for life, are taking part at this hour in the annual March of the Living in Poland. Heading the Israeli delegation at the somber march is Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. He's accompanied by several cabinet ministers and 20 Holocaust survivors, together with their grandchildren, many of them soldiers in the Israel Defense Forces. And what we're looking at right now are live pictures from Poland. Prime Minister Sharon will be addressing the closing ceremony along with Polish Prime Minister Mark Belka and orphan survivor Elie Wiesel. Israelis and Jews from around the world are marching the 3 kilometers from Auschwitz to Birkenau to honor the survivors, remember the dead, and to vow never again. The march also symbolically retraces the death marches that took place toward the end of World War II, when the Germans began emptying camps, forcing the inmates to walk hundreds of kilometers in freezing weather with little or no food. Thousands of people died in those marches. This year's March of the Living, the largest ever, has special significance, marking, as it does, the 60th anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi death camps. And as we can see, that march is getting underway right now. Following the ceremony at Birkenau, Prime Minister Sharon goes on to Auschwitz, where he will affix a mezuzah at the Jewish pavilion and light a memorial candle at the infamous crematorium. After the march, many of the participants will travel to Israel, where they will take part in the Independence Day celebrations. At 10 o'clock this morning, sirens wailed throughout the country, and the entire country came to a standstill for 2 minutes as Israelis paused to observe the annual Holocaust Remembrance Day. Thousands of people laid wreaths at the Yad Vashem Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem to remember the 6 million men, women, and children murdered at the hands of the Nazis. IBA's Viva Press brings us this report.
The country came to a pause this morning at 10 o'clock as the traditional siren blared to honor the 6 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust. Drivers stopped by their cars, pedestrians halted in the street, and soldiers stood at attention for the 2-minute silence. As has become customary in the capital's Mea She'arim neighborhood, a number of ultra-Orthodox Jews disregarded the siren and continued with whatever they were doing. They hold anti-Zionist views against the state of Israel. A number of official memorial ceremonies were held throughout the country. President Moshe Katsav, Knesset Speaker Reuven Rivlin, Holocaust survivors and soldiers laid wreaths at the Yad Vashem Holocaust Museum in the capital. The ceremony took place beside the eternal flame, which is only lit for Holocaust Remembrance Day. The traditional reading of Holocaust victims' names was held throughout the day. Memorial ceremonies opened last night at the Yad Vashem Holocaust Museum. Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, who is in Poland today, told those gathered that, quote, Jews will never again be without a home, without a safe refuge, without protection. We will never again be caught unprepared. Never again. 6 Holocaust survivors lit torches to commemorate the 6 million Jews murdered. This year's Memorial Day coincides with the 60th anniversary of the end of World War II and 60 years since the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. For IBA News, this is Viva Press.
Israelis making their way to the Yad Vashem Holocaust Museum for Memorial Day ceremonies were shocked today to see swastikas and graffiti scrawled on the road leading to the museum, reading, "Sharon is continuing on Hitler's way." Similar graffiti were sprayed on the facade of the Central Zionist Archives building in the capital. In recent months, there have been several incidents across the country where slogans have been found threatening the Prime Minister. Police suspect that opponents of the Gaza disengagement are behind the graffiti.
The movie Kingdom of Heaven, that was directed by Ridley Scott, has caused widespread controversy among critics. Some Christian groups protested over the movie, and for the first time in history of Hollywood, a positive picture of Muslims has been shown. The movie has shown the inhumanity of the Christian crusaders, which, according to the director, is the true picture of what has taken place in history. The movie was highly approved by some Muslim organizations. However, others think that the movie has intended to calm the feelings of Muslims in the United States. Not everything that comes out of Hollywood is bad. This is what director Ridley Scott is trying to prove. He says that the movie does justice for Muslims and for history by telling the story the way it happened. This movie tackles one of the most sensitive issues and discusses one of the most dangerous periods of conflict between the Christian West and the Muslim East.
This particular period was
This period in history has been misunderstood and has not been accurately described because it is a highly sensitive issue to deal with. When looking into all the facts surrounding the Christian crusade, there was 100 or 200 years of very bad behavior.
It is very hard to believe that an American director would present this kind of justice. However, this is what director Ridley Scott is trying to prove. This movie presents the struggle between Muslim leader Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi and the Christian invaders who attacked Jerusalem. What made the movie very unique is the justice that has been done to the personality of Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, as he gave the Christians amnesty after he declared victory by defeating the invaders.
I think it's a fantastic movie because it discusses the subject matter in a smart and factual way. The movie contains lots of messages and feelings that were depicted in a very accurate way, and I hope the people will perceive it as good.
Lots of critics cited the timing of such a movie is highly sensitive, as the struggle between the Muslim and the Christian civilizations is at its peak. Moreover, when President George Bush made the statement approximately 4 years ago, using the word crusade to fight terrorism, he proved that the West adopted this idea of crusades against Muslims, as was further confirmed by the war in Iraq.
We knew it was going to be... We knew that this movie was going to be an important movie because the timing is very suitable for these kind of movies. I think Ridley is a good director, and he made great efforts to make the movie logical, factual, and open to controversy.
The movie was not completely accurate, as it did not mention the fact that Jerusalem had been under the Christian occupation before Salah ad-Din liberated it from the Crusaders. The movie cited that the cause of war was due to the attacks of terrorists on Muslim pilgrims. Kingdom of Heaven did not escape the criticism of the Christian right-wing fundamentalists, who claim that the movie presents the views of bin Laden to history, as the movie shows that Muslims are educated and civilized, and the Christians were depicted as terrorists and invaders. Arabs have been depicted as terrorists in most Hollywood movies, which depict Arabs and Muslims as terrorists and wealthy sex slave masters. This movie gives justice to the Muslims, but it still may not get the approval of many people.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.